They never expected to wake up one day with thoughts of you filling their mind from the very first moment their eyes opened. That is the first thing you need to understand. Most people spend years pushing certain feelings deep beneath the surface. They convince themselves they are in control. They believe that if they ignore something long enough, it will eventually disappear. They use logic, distraction, routine, and determination to keep uncomfortable emotions locked away where they cannot disturb their carefully built life. But some feelings refuse to stay buried. The connection they tried so hard to ignore had already begun taking hold long before they realized it. At first, it seemed small enough to dismiss. It appeared harmless, easy to manage, easy to explain away. Yet beneath that calm appearance, something much deeper was happening. You felt it too. There was a shift you could not fully explain. A subtle change in their energy. A quiet sense that something important was growing beneath the surface, even while everything seemed normal on the outside. What was happening had very little to do with distance, timing, or confusion. It was something much more powerful. It was recognition. Not the kind that happens through words or open conversations. The kind that happens deep within a person when they begin realizing that someone has affected them in a way they never expected. Most people do not welcome that realization. When strong feelings first appear, the natural reaction is often resistance. Instead of accepting what they feel, they question it. They analyze it. They search for reasons why it cannot possibly be real. They hide behind explanations. They hide behind pride. They hide behind the image they have created of who they believe themselves to be. Because what they feel for you challenges something inside them. It forces them to face emotions they never planned to experience. And that is where the real struggle begins. The stronger the feeling becomes, the harder they fight against it. Every attempt to stay detached turns into another effort to regain control. Every attempt to remain indifferent becomes another battle against their own heart. This is what psychologists describe as repression. It is the mind's way of pushing away thoughts, desires, and emotions that feel uncomfortable or difficult to accept. But repression does not erase anything. It only hides it. The feeling remains. The emotion continues growing beneath the surface, and over time, the pressure becomes impossible to ignore. No matter how determined someone may be, what is buried eventually begins searching for a way out. That is why people often find themselves thinking about someone they tried so hard to forget. The very act of resisting creates more focus. The more they try not to think about you, the more space you occupy inside their mind. What they refused to acknowledge yesterday slowly becomes the thing they cannot stop noticing today. And that is exactly what happened. Nothing new suddenly appeared. No magical event changed everything overnight. What changed was their ability to keep denying what was already there. The walls they built around their emotions began to weaken. The explanations they once trusted started falling apart. The distractions that helped them avoid the truth stopped working. And in that quiet moment, they were left alone with a realization they could no longer escape. You appeared in their thoughts, not as a passing memory, but as something undeniable. Not as curiosity, not as attraction alone, but as emotional truth. That is when the mind begins to struggle. Because attraction can be ignored, curiosity can fade, temporary interest can disappear. But genuine emotional impact is different. It demands attention. It forces a person to ask questions they have spent months avoiding. Why does this person affect me so deeply? Why do they stay in my thoughts? Why does their absence feel so noticeable? Why have all my attempts to move on failed? At first, they searched for logical answers. They convinced themselves it was temporary. They told themselves it was nothing more than coincidence. They blamed chemistry. They blamed timing. They blamed circumstances. Anything felt safer than accepting what was actually happening. Because the truth carried weight. The truth required honesty. And honesty meant admitting that you mattered far more than they wanted to believe. Think about it. People do not spend energy fighting feelings that mean nothing. They do not work this hard to erase someone who never touched their heart. They do not create elaborate explanations for emotions that have no importance. The struggle itself reveals the significance. Every effort they made to push you away only strengthened your presence inside their mind. Every distraction eventually failed. Every attempt at emotional distance brought them back to the same place. Back to you. This was never a sign of weakness. It was a sign that something real was demanding recognition. The truth is, they wanted control. They wanted certainty. They wanted to remain completely in charge of their emotions and decisions. Then you appeared. And suddenly something existed that could not be predicted, organized, or controlled. You became the one variable they could not account for, the one feeling they could not manage, the one presence that remained no matter how hard they tried to remove it. That loss of control frightened them more than the feeling itself. Because what scared them was not simply who you were. It was what you awakened within them. You stirred emotions they thought were long gone. You opened parts of their heart they believed had been closed forever. You brought attention to needs, desires, and truths they had successfully ignored for years. And people rarely fear emotions themselves. What they fear is what those emotions demand from them. Real feelings require decisions. Real feelings require vulnerability. Real feelings require change. That is why their behavior became inconsistent. That is why they pulled away when things started becoming more intense. That is why their actions often seemed confusing. It was not because they felt nothing. It was because they felt more than they knew how to handle. Part of them wanted to move closer. Another part wanted to run. Part of them wanted answers. Another part wanted safety. The conflict inside them grew stronger every day. Avoidance is often misunderstood. Many people assume distance means lack of interest. But sometimes, distance means the opposite. Sometimes a person avoids what affects them most because they do not know how to face it. The stronger the emotional impact, the stronger the urge to retreat. Their conscious mind kept telling them to stay protected, to stay logical, to stay safe. But their subconscious had different plans. Every quiet moment brought your memory back. Every pause in their routine reminded them of what they were trying to escape. Instead of fading, your presence became stronger. Instead of becoming less important, you became impossible to ignore. Your image grew clearer, their awareness grew deeper, and eventually they reached a point where denial could no longer survive. Because denial needs distance. Denial needs uncertainty. Denial needs confusion. The moment certainty begins growing inside the heart, denial starts losing its power. That turning point arrived quietly. Not with drama, not with chaos, not with some dramatic confession. It arrived as a simple realization that changed everything. A realization they could no longer argue with. A realization they could no longer explain away. A realization that stood in front of them with complete clarity. The walls did not collapse because someone forced them down. They collapsed because the truth inside had become heavier than the lies protecting it. And once that happened, everything changed. Because understanding creates a different kind of challenge. Before, they were fighting uncertainty. Now they must face reality. They must face what these feelings truly mean. They must face the future. They must face the possibility of loss. They must face the consequences of continuing to ignore what their heart already knows. And that is where the next chapter of their journey begins. Lately, that noise inside them has become much stronger and harder to ignore in daily life. It is no longer something that stays in the background. It is now affecting their emotions, their thoughts, their behavior, and even the way their body reacts in small but noticeable ways. You can see it in how easily they lose focus. You can see it in sudden mood changes that do not match the situation around them. You can see it in strong reactions to small things that normally would not bother them at all. Something inside them is rising again and again from deep within. It is an unresolved truth. And it is demanding attention they are not fully ready to give yet. Right now, they are closer to a personal breaking point than they are willing to admit. Something inside them is starting to crack, but not on the surface where others can see it. On the outside, they still try to look calm. They still try to act normal. They still use control and routine to hide what is really happening. But underneath all of that, something is shifting. The mind is no longer fully pretending. The inner world is becoming louder than the outer image, and truth no longer needs permission to exist inside them. Repression always comes with a cost, and now that cost is showing up in full force. The more they tried to push this feeling down, the stronger it returned. What once felt easy to ignore now feels heavy and constant. What once felt distant now feels close all the time. What once could be denied now feels impossible to escape. When the subconscious can no longer stay quiet, it does not wait gently. It breaks through in sudden ways. It appears in irritation without reason. It shows up in overreactions to small problems. It surfaces in emotional instability that they themselves cannot fully explain. Their focus disappears the moment thoughts of you enter their mind, without warning, without permission, without control. At this point, you are no longer just someone from their outer world. You have entered their inner world. And that changes everything, because outer things can be avoided. Outer things can be ignored or replaced. But inner thoughts follow them everywhere, even into silence, even into sleep, even into moments where they are completely alone with themselves. Their resistance is weakening now, not because the feeling is gone, but because the real question inside them has changed. It is no longer about whether they feel something. That truth is already clear deep inside them. Now the question is what they are going to do with it. And that question is what scares them the most. Because action means exposure. It means vulnerability. It means losing control over something they tried so hard to manage. Most people avoid this kind of emotional situation their entire life. Because once something has changed you from within, you cannot go back to being the same person again. This feeling has not stayed on the surface. It has gone deeper into how they think, deeper into how they understand connection, and deeper into how they now experience your absence. Your absence is no longer silent to them. In fact, it feels louder than your presence ever did. It follows them everywhere. It sits with them in daily moments. It appears in quiet gaps between thoughts. And that is what is slowly breaking their emotional stability. Not just missing you in a simple way, but feeling your presence through your absence, again and again, no matter where they go, no matter what they try to focus on. This creates a tension that does not leave them. It keeps returning in cycles, each time stronger than before. Every attempt to move forward brings them back to the same realization. Nothing else feels the same anymore. Nothing else carries the same depth. Nothing else feels as real as what they felt with you. This comparison is slowly breaking down their inner defenses, because everything else now feels less intense, less meaningful, less emotionally alive. And this is something they did not expect to face. It forces them into a truth they tried to avoid for a long time, that this connection cannot be easily replaced. And if something cannot be replaced, then losing it becomes a real fear. A quiet fear starts growing inside them, not loud, not visible, but steady and constant, like something slowly tightening over time. Because losing something real feels more painful than never having it at all. Their behavior starts changing because of this inner pressure. Even they do not fully understand it yet. One moment they feel pulled toward you, the next moment they pull away. One moment they want closeness, the next moment they choose distance. This inconsistency is not random. It is the result of an inner conflict they cannot settle. One part of them wants to move closer to stop the tension, to stop the thoughts, to finally face what is happening. But another part of them is afraid of emotional exposure, afraid of losing control, afraid of what it would mean to fully accept this feeling. This internal conflict becomes exhausting, because neither side is willing to let go, and so the pressure keeps building. It goes beyond emotion now. It becomes identity conflict, who they are in public and who they are becoming in private. The version of them that avoids you and the version of them that cannot stop thinking about you. Both cannot exist in balance forever. One of them will eventually dominate, and they are starting to see their own patterns now more clearly than before. They notice how often they avoid certain thoughts. They notice how quickly they turn to distractions. They notice how they try to escape anything that brings them close to the truth. This awareness is uncomfortable, because once you see your own avoidance, you can no longer fully deny it. The illusion of control begins to break, and that creates pressure inside them. Even silence starts to feel unnatural now. Even distance starts to feel like something forced. Even their emotional numbness is no longer working the way it used to. Something inside them has already changed permanently, and now it is asking for resolution. Their mind cannot stay in contradiction forever. At some point, it has to choose a direction. They are standing very close to that point now, closer than they want to admit. One more emotional push, one more moment of weakness, one more breakdown of control, and they will cross a line they cannot come back from easily. This process is not going to fade slowly. It is moving toward a clear breaking point, where denial will no longer be possible, because the truth is no longer outside them. It is surrounding them from every side. There is no more escape through logic, no more escape through distraction, and no more escape through distance. Only the truth remains, and it is waiting for them to finally face it. The final stage of this long inner repression is no longer silence or delay. It is direct confrontation with what they have been carrying inside all along. That confrontation is getting closer, whether they feel prepared for it or not. The subconscious is no longer waiting for permission. It is pushing for alignment between what they feel inside and what they show on the outside. But right now, there is still a painful gap between those two sides of them. And that gap is creating intense psychological pressure. It is not something gentle anymore. It is something that builds tension inside them every day, forcing them toward a decision they can no longer postpone forever. At this stage, the mind no longer accepts half choices. It does not allow emotional confusion to stay comfortable for long. It starts pushing for clarity, even if that clarity feels uncomfortable or overwhelming. There is a strong inner momentum forming now. It is moving them away from their old defenses, step by step, whether they like it or not. What once felt safe is starting to feel limited. What once felt controlled is starting to feel unstable. And what once felt easy to ignore is now demanding full attention. Inside them, a clear direction is slowly forming, not through external pressure, but through an inner realization that cannot be avoided anymore. They are beginning to understand something without anyone telling them. They can no longer return to how they used to think or feel. This understanding is permanent. It changes how they see everything connected to you. Every excuse they once used to explain their emotions now feels weak and empty. Every delay they created now feels unnatural. Every attempt to push the feeling away now feels like they were fighting against themselves. And that is why the pressure feels heavier than before. Because they are no longer only dealing with emotions, they are dealing with truth. People can handle pain for a while. They can even handle fear if they believe it is temporary. But what becomes unbearable is living in constant conflict with something they already know deep inside is real. That kind of inner conflict slowly breaks resistance. And that is exactly what is happening now. They are reaching a point where avoiding you feels more painful than facing what this connection actually means. Their resistance is weakening, not because they decided to let go, but because they are running out of reasons to keep holding back. The walls they built around their emotions are no longer strong enough to protect them from what they feel. And slowly, those walls are starting to lose their purpose. The idea that time would erase everything is now breaking down completely. Time did not remove anything. Instead, it made everything clearer. It made the feelings stronger. It made the emotional weight heavier, and it made the truth impossible to ignore. Now there is nowhere left to hide behind distraction or denial. What they once tried to push away is now standing clearly inside their awareness. Inaction is starting to feel heavier than risk itself. Staying silent feels more painful than speaking, and avoiding the truth feels more exhausting than facing it. They are no longer trying to minimize what they feel. That stage is already gone. Now even silence feels unnatural. Even distance feels forced. Even pretending feels like a burden they cannot carry anymore. Their inner world is no longer divided into confusion and denial. Everything is starting to come together into one clear realization. Clarity has not brought them peace. Instead, it has brought urgency. It has created restlessness. It has created emotional pressure that keeps pushing them forward. They are being pulled toward honesty, even if they are not fully ready for it yet. What they feel for you is no longer uncertain or weak. It has become stable, deep, and real inside them. And something that real cannot simply disappear without leaving a lasting impact. At this point, they are beginning to understand that losing this connection would feel like losing a part of themselves. And that realization changes everything for them. Because once something becomes part of your inner world, it cannot be erased easily. It stays, it grows, it returns in silence, and it reshapes how you think, even when you try to move away from it. That suppressed truth is now building pressure again, and when it finally reaches the surface, it will not come gently. It will return with intensity. It will return with clarity. And it will return in a way that can no longer be ignored or pushed back. What they feel has already crossed the point of simple emotion. It has become something deeper that demands resolution. And now they are standing at the edge of that realization, where everything must finally be faced, one way or another.